All right. All right. All right. All right. And then we get chat up real quick so that you guys can see it or see yourselves, I guess. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Um, all right. Okay, there she. Okay. This should be so much easier. All right. I feel like they should make that so much easier so you can just like put the chat up on screen like a lot quicker. But you know, YouTube does YouTube stuff. All right, what's going on? What's going on this week? How y'all been? How y'all been? Let's see. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Oh my gosh, yeah, with it. Okay. Rouse frequencies, Chicagoan. Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, there's a lot of work going into Metro. Um, yeah, I know. There's also a lot of stuff going on with California High Speed Rail and Brightline West. But again, I need to wait off. I need to hold that off for like the actual main channel because I don't want to spoil any of that stuff. Um, what's up, Aaron? Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I need to figure out like I haven't really had enough chance or time to actually um, like kind of separate the two channels branding wise. I mean, of course, it's hard to stay with both um, channels to like kind of keep the brand consistent, but then also like different enough so people know that they're like on two different channels. It's kind of different, difficult, but I'll work with it. I just need to figure out how I'm gonna do that. Um, Probably like I'll probably have to like change the banner or something like that. Um, just and yeah. All right. So let's get into the first story. All right. So we have a bunch of stories today. Um, let's go to the list. So the stories we have today is Metro retired their 2000 series rail cars, which is a really big moment for them. It's really like an RIP moment for their 2000s rail cars. Um, Again, like with all the new rail cars coming in, um, Metro has really, WMATA has really been upgrading their fleet, upgrading the rolling stock. So that's really nice. Then Governor Newsom signed a transit measure. Uh, so that's also going to be good. Let's see if that actually gets voted on. Hopefully it does go all the way through. So then um, all these transit agencies can have, and California can have some, well needed funding in Northern California. And then VTA is moving forward with the San Jose tunnel design for BART. Um, that's interesting. Again, that's been like a whole thing for like the past like decade, I want to say. So that's going to be interesting. And then what else? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the thumbnail of this video is the Green Line extension in Minneapolis. So Minneapolis, Minnesota, their metro, their light rail system, which is not really talked about that much, is actually expanding. I know the last time we really, well, I didn't talk about it, but the most you ever really hear about Minneapolis is the fact that like what was it called? I think it was called the North Star, something like that. Their commuter rail line, which was wildly unpopular, just simply because it just didn't really connect enough places. it didn't become what it was supposed to become, that actually stopped service. So that's kind of unfortunate. And uh, then the last thing we have is Sound Transit is piloting fare gates for their light rail trains, which is interesting to say the least. Um, we'll see how that goes. You don't really hear about fare gates. I feel like, well, you sometimes do. I don't know how it's gonna work out for Sound Transit. Um, Again, I don't know if like when you're building your stations in a certain way. Well, you know what? We'll get to that later. But all right, let's start off with WMATA first.
Back to the 1980s have now officially been retired. The Metros marking the end of an era as rail cars dating back to the 1980s have now officially been retired. The 2000 series rail cars were filled with a lot of brown and orange seats and carpet. Now the last rail car is on its way to be recycled. News 4 transportation reporter Adam Tuss has our story.
Yes, the carpet on the Metro rail cars. Takes you back a bit, doesn't it? Maybe not in a good way.
Things fall on it, stay on it, and whatever. Who knows when they'll get a chance to clean it.
But the carpet like traps that smell.
Yeah, you don't want that.
There was that must that could occasionally fill a Metro train. Ugh. But it is now officially gone forever. Metro just decommissioned and removed its last ever 2000 series rail car from...
Damn. R.I.P. R.I.P. There goes there. That's a loss. But you know what? You know what though? A lot of new stuff has come in. So that's great. But it is sad to see them go though. It's like these are like iconic for 70s metros. But yeah. Also, when it comes to like the seating and like the coloring back then, 70s and 80s, like you just look at this dated interior, but there's something about it that's like charming, or definitely more charming than what we see with the more modern equipment coming in. I think the color palette is what's nice. I mean, even if our modern trains came in with a nice bright color palette, but without the carpet and the hard to clean padded seating, I think it would still look like interesting, unique. Yeah, it would make your commute a little bit brighter in some type of way.
Occasionally fill a Metro train. Ugh. But it is now officially gone forever. Metro just decommissioned and removed its last ever 2000 series rail car from Metro property. And the carpet, which was part of the old Metro, is not expected to come back.
Now look, for so many of us, that brown and orange color scheme, the carpet on the Metro train, it was iconic. It was what you remembered on your school field trip. Well, no more. This is what you get on the Metro train as far as flooring from now on.
I think it's not. It's probably more sanitary.
The 2000 series rail cars began service in 1983. They had to be pulled out of storage a few years ago when there were real issues with the 7000 series cars to help carry riders. And Metro is recognizing the significance of those 2000 series cars.
When you think about that, we moved about 775 million people on those cars over a 41-year period. Those cars operated over 200 million miles.
The 2Ks, as they're known.
Wow, look at this photo. I'm not gonna lie, even the design for back then, it still seems kind of like modern, Like at least the shell, like the body shell is modern, which is nice to see. See. I was wondering how much of the train they can recycle versus co-reefing like MTA does. Well, the WMATA doesn't, from my knowledge, WMATA doesn't reef their train sets. They pretty much recycle like via like scrap yards and stuff like that. The MTA stopped reefing the train sets. For those of you who don't know, when reefing is when you basically when a transit agency basically takes out all like the windows, the seating, all that type of stuff, and then make sure that there's like no type of degradable plastics, and then they put it on a barge, take it out into the Atlantic Ocean, and then they drop it in like typically sort of shallow waters, and then they drop it into the ocean, and then for it to become a reef. The MTA used to do it for a while, but then they stopped doing it with more of the quote unquote modern trains because they don't degrade, or they degrade faster in the ocean than some of the older trains, because like there's a difference between like the steel, or the amount of steel and aluminum used in more modern trains that we've been reefing. So the MTA stopped doing it, and the only other transit agency I know of that was doing it a lot was MARTA. MARTA was also reefing trains as well, and so they stopped doing it as well. So yeah, most of these trains will be scrapped, and just turn into scrap metal and just reuse for something else.
Were also the first rail cars to have external speakers making announcements. Now they're headed outside of Baltimore to be taken apart and recycled. Metro says they have earned their retirement, and we salute them. Along the Metro system, Adam Tuss, News 4.
Now
Yeah, it is more expensive to reef modern trains. But the thing is, what they used to do is like the transit agencies used to be essentially like they would be paid almost the same for as if they were to scrap it, or like paid more, so that like they would be subsidized for reefing the trains and helping the environment in that case. So transit agencies would do it either way, even if they were spending more money. Though that money was covered, it was subsidized, either by the government or by like organizations and stuff like that who wanted to create more of a habitat for their trains. So for their trains, for their fish and stuff like that. So yeah. MTA, the Marine Transit Authority. Yeah, no, pretty much. Yeah, and honestly, back then, yeah, even before that, New York was dumping a lot of stuff into the water, so it wasn't it wasn't as controversial as it is today. Because while it was thought that this like reefing was helping out the environment in some type of way, it was also kind of not helping out, especially with the modern equipment where, again, like when I say modern equipment, I'm talking about equipment that's built in like the 70s. That equipment basically disintegrates in the ocean. Like, so at that point, you're spending all that money just to have the metal disintegrate in the ocean as soon as after like less than 10 years of you putting it in there. So, yeah. But yeah, it's nice. I mean, the newer train sets, there's just like this sterile like hospital look about the newer train sets, and in general, like across like American systems. Like there just needs to be a little bit more color in there. I wish there was more color in there. I do like MARTA's new Stadler train sets they got, because they don't look like this. There's like you can do modern and you can also do colorful. You can do both. You can do both. You don't have to just choose one or the other, because this looks very boring and plain. Yeah. Yeah, Apple Store looking train. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's just like you can put a little bit of color, like an actual color palette in there. You don't gotta, All right, the next one is Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom. We'd love to talk about California. Love that.
Thanks, Lawrence. Bay Area transit agencies could be given a lifeline as they face major budget deficits. Governor Newsom has signed a transit tax measure that will be added on the 2026 ballot. KRON 4's Stephanie Rothman reports.
This bill has been years in the making. Now, finally, local transit agencies are one step closer to a financial lifeline. The question is whether the voters in San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties will give it to them. Bay Area transit agencies are facing major budget deficits. BART is facing a $380 million deficit, and without funding, the amount of weekday trains could be heavily cut down. Muni faces a $320 million deficit. This could result in a 50% cut to service. And AC Transit could also face cuts up to 37%. If approved by voters next year, Senator Jesse Arreguín, who co-authored this bill, says the sales tax measure would provide funding for Bay Area transit agencies, not just on a yearly basis, but secure their futures for the next 14 years.
We have a lot of work to do now that this bill's passed.
You see, and like stuff like that, like a lot of transit agencies are trying to catch up on their budget deficits, but then we also have to think about the future, you know? And a lot of times when we see budget deficits, the next thing that, or the next step that a lot of transit agencies do is like, hey, let's try to like make up for that budget deficit. Let's try to equal it. But they don't actually try to go above and beyond for that. And so that's kind of like the downside of it. It's like we don't try to actually plan for the future and actually have more funding so that like, hey, like when with inflation and all that type of stuff, these transit agencies are going to be secure. So that's just kind of unfortunate. But in this case, it's good to see that like we're actually putting in a buffer for the future.
Secure their futures for the next 14 years.
We have a lot of work to do now that this bill's passed to educate the voters and to win next year. But this is a very critical step forward.
But even if the measure is approved, the funding wouldn't trickle in for years. Governor Newsom and state agencies have authorized a $750 million loan that would offer interim relief. But Senator Arreguín stresses it's not just about budget relief, but also improving the agencies and holding them accountable.
Do an efficiency review of all the transit operators. We look at ways to reduce costs, to look at consolidation of agencies.
Hey, and what he just said right there, consolidation of agencies is really important. The Bay Area tends to, the agencies tend to compete, not only in competing for funding, right, but they're also competing for ridership as well, which is kind of like the downside of the way that the Bay Area is set up right now. And I understand that it's set up right now because of the funding schemes and the way that each county funds transportation in the Bay Area and around the Bay Area, but the issue is really that it's a lack of cooperation between each one, and each transit agency has a different. Let's say, for example, each transit agency represents the counties that are funding them, right? And so we end up having a disjointed network of transit agencies because everybody is being represented by a different county, right? And sometimes that means that the overall goal of creating public transportation tends to get lost. So like you end up creating these invisible barriers, you know?
And another aspect of it as well is that if people aren't performing, that a committee of representatives of all the 5 counties can withhold funding.
Adding this will not only stabilize transit, but also the lives of residents that rely on them.
There's so many people in my district in the East Bay that are transit dependent, that go to work, that need transit to go see their doctor, to go to the grocery store, to take their kid to school. And transit really is a lifeline for many low-income and working families in.
The Department of Finance has until January 10, 2026 to finalize the terms of the loans for
Cut that man off.
BART, Muni, AC Transit, and Caltrain. Reporting from the newsroom, Stephanie Rothman.
You know what? I'm going to cut you off. All right, you cut him off. I'm gonna cut you off. I don't know why the news does that. Why can't they just let somebody finish the sentence? Like for once, like just let them finish the sentence, man. Damn. All right. All right. So the next one, sticking in around the Bay Area, we're gonna talk about BART. We're gonna talk about the VTA moving forward with San Jose's tunnel design for the BART extension. So let's see what's going on right there.
VTA's board made it official today, voting to press forward with the plans to dig a single large tunnel as it extends BART to downtown San Jose. Our investigative unit has been reporting on questions surrounding the cost and safety of this design amid a $1 billion federal funding shortfall.
Yeah, is that, yeah, what you said, Shadow Magi, so, okay. The new fare gates, and this is why I think like the attention on like fare evasion when it comes to like BART and like CTA and like the MTA and stuff like that, when it comes to like the actual fare gates and the fare gate designs, there's so much money being poured into these fare gate designs, but the reality of it is if somebody's not going to pay, they're just not going to pay. So it's like, it doesn't, I don't think it's the fare gate designs that really need to be changed. If we're really talking about fare evasions, it needs to be the actual checking of tickets and stuff like that on the actual vehicles themselves. That needs to step up. But the actual fare gates I think there's a lot of money being wasted there, and I can't help but think that this money is being wasted there on purpose when it comes to these fare gates. It's like the fare gates, we all have well, not every system, as we'll see with Sound Transit, but the systems already have fare gates, right? People are doing whatever they can to not pay the fare, right? They're gonna keep on doing that. So it's like it's to the point where it's like if you really want to stop fare evasion, then you need to start checking people's tickets and doing stuff like that to make sure that they're penalized when they are actually fare evading. That's the only way to do it. Putting in new fare gates and doing stuff like that is not going to change anything. So that's why I feel like there's definitely money being wasted somewhere around there. And it just, to me, it's just kind of suspect, very suspect when you spend like $1 billion on fare evasion gates themselves, right? And it's just like, that's not going to do anything. It's just kind of like, I don't know, like that's some mismanagement right there.
VTA's board is backing a single 53-foot wide tunnel to run nearly 100 feet below ground. The single tunnel project has the advantage of being less disruptive to local businesses since the boring will be so deep, but critics say it will end up costing more in the end, and they worry about how difficult it would be to evacuate riders during an emergency when they...
And this is the same thing. It goes back to exactly like, why do we have to have our stations get this deep? I understand that there's going to disrupt businesses and stuff like that while the construction is going. It's going to disrupt businesses while the construction is going. That's very, it's upsetting for those businesses. It makes sense to me. I understand that, but you're adding more, like you're instead of actually compensating those businesses for the amount of like patronage they're probably going to lose or whatever from the construction, from the amount of foot traffic or car traffic they're going to lose from the construction, that would be a lot quicker and cheaper, right? You're going to try to impact them as little as possible while spending extra billions to do stuff like this and build extremely deep tunnels, right? To the point where not only does this add a safety risk to it, so how long will it take to actually evacuate people from these tunnels, but it also, because remember, these tunnels have to have emergency exits and stuff like that, not just in the stations, but along the tunnels, depending on how long the tunnel section is between each station. So that's already a thing, right? BART has extremely long trains, right? So having stations like this is not be this deep is just not good in general. Like both of these, the twin board and the single board, just not good. Like we really need to go back to cut and cover, but we've lost our ways a little bit. Utility relocation and dealing with residents and businesses that are going to be upset for half a decade is not enough for you to be doing all this extra stuff for a whole decade, for 2 decades. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't add up to me. But I think that not only would this add extra time, well, I don't think that, I know that not only will this add extra time for exiting the station in case of an emergency, but even without an emergency, you're adding extra time to people's commutes, because now instead of having to go up, 2 escalators or whatever, you're going up 3 or 4 escalators just to get down to your train. You have to take and this is just less energy efficient in the long run, because now you're spending more energy getting people up and down between the trains. The one thing that New York prided itself on in the beginning stages of constructing subways and stuff like that was that the stations were as close as possible to the surface while still being underground, which means that people can get down to the trains as quickly as possible. This actually reduces travel time. You added this elaborate escalator plan and all this type of stuff. This is going to add to the travel time. People are going to put this into their travel time, which means that's the difference between them either driving or them taking public transportation. Because now you just added 2 extra minutes for them just to get down to their trains. And for what? Because you wanted to not make a couple businesses angry, hundreds of residents angry for 5 years? So you do all this, and then it's just, that's unfortunate.
Since the boring will be so deep, but critics say it will end up costing more in the end, and they worry about how difficult it would be to evacuate riders during an emergency when they have to climb 100 feet to street level. Our investigative reporter Jackson Vanderbecken has been following this process and joins us live now. And Jackson, thanks so much for being with us. The board gave the green light today. What happens now?
Well, the board basically authorized them to go forward with this single bore design. It's been on the drawing boards for a long time, and it's going to take some time to get into place. There's a lot of elements that need to be fulfilled, and this is a major step forward because they basically rejected any alternative design. So now it's the single bore and only the single bore they're considering.
Okay, so how much is this project going to cost, and how much money is there available right now for this tunnel?
Well, they're hoping the cost will be less than $12.7 billion. But there are a lot of factors. They're digging far under the ground, there's soft soil, there's potential problems that they acknowledge are significant risks. And a peer review panel warned that, there'll be challenges up ahead. So the idea is to keep costs below that $12.7 billion because of the federal funding shortfall. And they've also made some other cuts, like they've eliminated parking structures and some other parking lots and some other reconfigurations to try to save some money. And they have a little state money added.
Which, let's be real, is what they should have probably been doing in the first place. I think that should have probably been because you're only adding parking lots if your actual public transportation network a local public transportation network around the stations isn't, suitable enough. If you have a good public transportation network, and let's say somebody still needs to drive for some reason, then they can drive to a different parking deck or whatever to take the train. But yeah. California does transportation a little backwards sometimes. But I'm happy to see that. Well, maybe not with this single board tunnel type of design, but when it comes to funding, at least we're starting to see like an actual change, or like change in the right direction.
Configurations to try to save some money, and they have a little state money added to the mix.
Okay, we saw some videos, some renditions of the equipment. Do they already know what's going to bore the tunnel? Do they already have the equipment?
They've actually built the equipment to bore this 53-foot wide tunnel in Germany, and it's sitting there. They're actually paying the company that built this device to store it. And quite frankly, they really don't know quite when they're going to be able to bring that machine here and start it. It's expected to be...
And see, that adds to all the cost. Them even storing the machines is adding to the cost, And so that's why it's like, whenever you wonder, like, hey, why is our project overblown? Like, why have the contingency funds been completely dried up? This is why. It's because, you plan these elaborate schemes, when the scheme could have been as simple as cut and cover. It could have been really simple. But then they went too crazy with it, knowing that they didn't have the money for it, And so that's like, you don't have the money for it. So it's like, what are we doing?
Started sometime in early 2029 where they would actually do the boring.
Okay, hopefully this project comes maybe under budget. Hopefully that's necessary to get it to completion. Okay, Jansen Vander.
He's like, yeah, no. He's like, yeah. That's that I doubt it type of nod. Anyways, let's go on to a project that's actually nearing completion. Out of Minneapolis, we're going to talk about the Green Line extension that's entering its testing phase.
This summer, the Green Line extension...
Okay, this is actually not a news video, but this is actually from Metro, the Metro Green Line YouTube itself. So we can see an in-depth look at it, and then we can look at the news report later on.
Entered the final major stage of project development, the testing phase. With the recent completion of track installation connecting east and west construction segments, this past week, 6 rail vehicles were pulled from Target Field Station to Southwest Station in Eden Prairie, marking the first time light rail vehicles have operated on track within the 14.5-mile corridor. To find out exactly what happens during this testing phase, we spoke with Eric Schauer.
Like, look at all this new housing that's being built around the stations already. See, like, just the idea of a permanent transit mode being built in neighborhoods and stuff like that creates all this development before it even gets there, which is really interesting to see. It's always interesting to see.
This testing phase, we spoke with Eric Schauer, the system's principal contract administrator.
For years, we've been in the heavy construction phase of the project, building all the track stations, all the electrical wires that will power the train. Now we're entering the train testing phase. We're actually going to see real trains out there on the tracks, performing all the various train routes and verifying all the grade crossing gate arms activate correctly. The first test we do is what we call a dead car pull, where we use our rail car mover to pull a train without power across the whole alignment, and we have clearance fingers on the outside of the train car that mimic the dynamic envelope of the train, since the train does sway as it moves at speed or around curves. So we're first checking all that to make sure we have safe clearances for the train across the whole system before we could do what we call a live wire train test, where the trains are operating under their own power. It takes a lot.
That's the best part. That's what we really come to see is the live wire train test. That's when it all comes together, and then you're just waiting to get on the train. Shout out to the Eglinton Crosstown because that's essentially what's going on over there. You're just kind of looking at the train like, when can I get on it? Like, why are we still testing? But testing takes a while.
Train test where the trains are operating under their own power. It takes a long time to run all these tests because they're very technical, very complicated. There's a lot of different stakeholders involved in setting them up to make sure the power is activated correctly and safely, to make sure the rail signal system is all working correctly before we run a test train. We literally run almost 4,000 tests during this test phase, both before and during. So it takes a long time to run all the many routes we have across all the crossovers we have through the alignment before we can verify that the full system is safe and ready to operate with passengers and revenue service. Residents can expect to see anywhere from 1 to 6 test train cars out on the alignment, moving back and forth to test various train routes, to ensure all the grade crossing gate arms are activating correctly at the right time.
Why does it sound like they're doing excess testing See, I think when it comes to testing and stuff, he said 4,000 tests. They're testing a bunch of different equipment. And most of the equipment is digital. A lot of the digital equipment, again, needs to be tested a lot because that's where stuff tends to fail nowadays, is like all the digital equipment tends to fail. That's what happened to the Acellas. Last thing you need is this thing to actually it can go a lot worse essentially. And I feel like there needs to be a faster way to test these things or a more efficient way to test these things. So I don't think that the fact that they're, doing a lot of tests or it's excess tests, but I think it's the efficiency and how they do tests is where we end up having problems. For example, like when it comes to the testing each and every single crossover and each and every single, but it also comes to budget. Like how much budget are you willing to spend up front to do the test so that you can have more crews doing the tests and more equipment for the testing? That way it can go by faster. Excuse me. But it's like, the less equipment you have, the less crews you have doing the testing, then of course it's going to take a while to actually complete. And, when you do stuff like this, when you have grade crossings add to time. Even though it's like, this is cheaper to have grade crossings in the final. But then, when it actually comes to doing the heavy construction, but now you have to actually test the grade crossings and stuff like that. And then naturally, we've seen that people tend to be a little bit interesting around grade crossings, so then this could also add to some issues. And you don't want, last thing you want is to have somebody sue the Metro over an incident that they were really at fault for. But, of course, maybe the grade crossing signal didn't go down all the way, So there's a lot to think about there. But, I think over testing stuff is really the efficiency of which or how we test stuff, how we test these rail lines is where the issue lies.
Out on the alignment, moving back and forth to test various train routes, to ensure all the grade crossing gate arms are activating correctly at the right time to provide enough clearance time for the grade crossings, for traffic to come to a stop before the gates drop and have the trains pass through, and to see trains testing all the routes between all the stations and all the crossovers that allow the train to cross over from one track to the other. So there's hundreds of train routes we need to test. So that is what we are doing on the alignment when you see a train moving back and forth. Residents can expect to see trains moving at any point, in any direction, at any time. So people really need to make sure that they're assuming that a train could approach at any moment when we're in the test train phase. When our systems contract is finished with all the necessary train testing, we will enter what we call the pre-revenue service phase, and that is when we're mimicking real life service in a way, when we're testing trains with the actual schedule that we plan to implement, when we're actually ready to move customers, and training in all the new train operators on the new alignment. All these tests are being run to ensure the system will operate safely for customers once we're in a revenue service in 2027. There's, again, thousands of tests we have to run to enter revenue service.
Well, even though it's getting pushed right here, but it does have the pantograph up, which is interesting. So I guess they're also testing maybe not the electrical components between the two, but maybe the actual connection between the pantographs, because they still have the fingers out. So maybe I don't know. It's probably just like, again, like clearance testing when it comes to the pantograph itself, but interesting.
This in 2027. There's, again, thousands of tests we have to run to ensure all the aspects of the LRT system are operating safely and will operate correctly for rail operations when that time comes for pre-revenue and revenue service testing.
For more information about the testing phase, public safety messages, and additional resources, please go to our webpage.
Okay. I mean, shout out to them for putting this here, because, I was not expecting this, but okay.
All right, one more thing before we hit a break and talk to the chief for real this time. We want to go check in with our Lauren Entrego, because we're following the green line, Lauren. I know there's not much going on behind you, so explain where you are, what's going on. It's a benchmark day.
Day and really exciting, Amy. Soon Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and St. Louis Park will all be connected to the Twin Cities Metro Transit light rail system. And we're at the very last stop of the new Green Line extension. This is the Southwest Station. You've maybe been here before if you've taken a Metro Transit bus or anything with Southwest Transit. But this is a beautiful new waiting space. It's covered, it has heaters, it has screens with arrival and departure times.
This is a nice station. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like underneath the parking deck, I do like train stations and stuff. Like if you're gonna build a large parking deck, building it over the station and like over the tracks so you can add it as like cover, and then actually doing good lighting. Even though it is daytime, so I don't know how sketchy this is gonna look like at night. But having good lighting and stuff like that as well. So it's always cool. It's cool to see.
These tracks, though, have never been used, but neighbors are very familiar with them. Construction started over 7 years ago on this track, which has become the costliest public works project in state history, now totaling over $3 billion. This is a very anticipated update because lots of things have pushed.
And you can see they have housing literally right here. So and this is at the end of the line, by the way. So this is like all the way at the end, and they have housing right here. Pretty sure there's a freeway around here as well, and then so the buses pull onto this side, which is behind chat right now. The buses pull onto the side, and the bus bays are over there, and then so the bus bays would be on this side right here, and then the parking deck is over on top and then over on the side right here. And then there's a bunch of commercial, like this is how you do TOD. This area is actually how you do TOD. It's probably like one of the best examples of TOD, even though it's like a park and ride system, but it's only a park and ride system and TOD because it's so close to a freeway. But I also like how they have like this, the glass, like wall that splits the parking and the train station itself is also really good, because what happens is, I don't know, anybody who's ever been like a parking deck Um, Anybody who's ever been like a parking deck, you feel the wind. Like when on a windy day, especially in Minnesota, right? Like if you're in like a cold climate, like that would be horrible to actually wait for this train in. So having this glass up is like really, really nice to see.
But neighbors are very familiar with them. Construction started over 7 years ago on this track, which has become the costliest public works project in state history, now totaling over $3 billion. This is a very anticipated update because lots of things have pushed back and delayed this project. Some good news, though, the Metropolitan
Right,
Council.
yeah, exactly what you said. It doesn't look like, the parking aspect hasn't really completely taken over the pedestrian aspect, which is nice to see. It's like, which is kind of rare to see, you know? The fact that we have housing this close and the fact that you can literally just walk over to it. You know, it's not like there's like this giant gap. There's a lot of different pedestrian pathways to get to the actual destination. That's the point of having these stations, is to create destinations around the stations. And we just put large parking decks, you know, and this station could have well been just a large parking deck, and that would have kind of ruined the whole point of the project. And a lot of transit agencies tend to do that, but I'm happy to see that, like, you know, they actually went a different method with this.
Just announced today they have moved on to the next phase, which is safety testing. That's what you're seeing right here on the tracks right now. So I want to show you a map of the Green Line Extension project. When it's completed, it's going to service 16 different stations in the Southwest Metro.
And look how much they're building. Like, this is how much they're opening all at once. So they're literally coming all the way over from downtown right here, which is Target Field. And then the blue line is over here, right? But they're coming all the way down this way and ending all the way over here. You know, that's a really long extension. And by the way, this goes all the way out to St. Paul, right? So it's like, this is like this is a really long line.
About 14 and a half miles long. It stretches from Target Field through Hopkins, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, all the way here to Eden Prairie at the Southwest Station. And we have some photos of what was going on this morning. Early today, Metro Transit began its first test runs of the light rail track. So they're testing all sorts of things here, from the traction of the metal tracks to the sounds that come over the warnings in the warming center, as you just heard, to light signals at each stop, and whether everything is working properly. Metro Transit is going to complete over 4,000 safety tests between now and their projected opening date, which is sometime in 2027. So what do you need to know right now? The Green Line extension, which has been...
But I agree, though. Like, 2020... All right, so let's say this is 2027, right? The purple line, which we talked about was it last stream or 2 streams ago? I can't remember. But whenever we talked about the purple line 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we talked about the purple line in Maryland, and then that was also opening in late 2027. So this might be early 2027. That might be late 2027. But just at the level that the purple line is at right now, all the tracks still haven't been laid, but they are doing dynamic testing with the trains themselves. They're not being pulled or anything like that. They're just running themselves. And then you have this, and it's like 2027. I mean, I get 4,000 tests, right? But again, like 2027 is going to take you a year. What, like maybe like probably is going to take them a year and a half. I don't know if they're going to open directly at 2027 in January, or they're going to spend some time. So I think it's safe to say like a year and a half for them to test everything. I feel like, you know, if that's where like where the lack of investment kind of comes from, where it's like, you know, if they actually had more money and more manpower to actually test all this stuff, then it'll probably go by a lot quicker. But like a year and a half of testing is kind of wild when everything's just going to be basically sitting here, you know. It's all here, but it's just going to sit here for now.
the ground for over 7 years is now live. So we need to start treating these tracks as live tracks. You're going to be seeing carts and something called the cart wagon, the truck wagon, moving on both sides of the light rail track every day at all hours of the day between now and 2027. We don't have an exact date yet, Amy, of when this track will be live. A lot of safety inspections have to go on between multiple different organizations that are all kind of working together on this project between now and then. But sometime in 2027, Eden Prairie residents will be able to take the light rail to a Twins game and really connect the Southwest Metro to the greater project. They have a project website where you can learn the exact test times of your station throughout any of those Southwest suburbs. Metro Transit website has all of the details, but certainly an exciting update for folks who have seen this track on the ground for years and have been waiting to take it.
Yeah, and definitely great advice. Just heads up. I mean, you're so used to nothing happening, and so now really so important to just, as you're approaching, or just know that there's going to be stuff going on. So, all right, Lauren, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
It's unfair to board.
Okay, so then the next story, that was a nice little story. We're gonna go back to more light rail stuff. Seems like there's a lot of light rail news going on. Are there really that many light rail systems in the U.S.? It's kind of crazy when you realize it. I'm like, bro, I feel like I'm talking about a lot, because the main point of this channel is to talk about transit in general. So actually local transit and stuff like that. And because I talk a lot about regional transit and intercity public transportation on the main channel and do video essays on that type of stuff. And this one is to talk more about the local transit that I often don't get a chance to talk about. But is there really there's a lot of light rail systems, a lot of light rail systems out there. The U.S. has only been building light rail. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, since Sacramento built theirs. I think it was because who really started this off? It was really San Diego. So San Diego started off, and then all of a sudden there's just and then it was the light rail craze. And we just started building light rail. But it's kind of crazy because it's we're building all this light rail, but a lot of these cities, instead of building light rail, they could have probably built some type of light metro, not a full-scale metro, but a light metro that you would see in Vancouver or whatever. And, that could have been good for them. But they settled on light rail, and so now we have this weird system. But again, I think it was that type of thought process of okay, we can street run and do all this other stuff that you couldn't do with light metro. But light metro is great because for some of these cities, they need it because they don't quite have the density for a full heavy metro, or full scale metro. But then the actual light metro has shorter stations and stuff like that where it could have been a lot easier to build. But Seattle should have built a light metro, let's be real, but we have light rail instead, which is, it's better than nothing, I guess. So yeah, this story is about Sound Transit piloting fare gates for their light rail stations. And just look at the amount of space that they have to actually put these fare gates. Where are they actually going to put these fare gates in the stations? I've seen, even looking at the LA Metro, and when they have the LA Metro's stations and their the platforms, either island platforms or the side platforms, are so skinny. You're only really able to slide in maybe 2 fare gates. And maybe because the ridership isn't there, it isn't at that level. Maybe that's why. But when it really comes down to it, it's just I don't know. I don't know if fare gates is the right option for them. Again, I think if they have people checking the fares, like a fare checker, then that's the way to maintain, that type of integrity, that fare integrity. But instead, they're doing fare gates, which, again, they're just a barrier that people can easily like. What's gonna stop somebody who, if they really don't want to pay their fare, just walk around on the tracks and walk around to the actual platform? Like, unlike the LA Metro, unlike like other metro systems, this is all low floor. All these stations are low floor. If somebody really didn't want to pay their fare to that extent, then they're just gonna walk on the tracks and then walk onto the platform. It really wouldn't be that difficult. You're not stopping anybody, is what I'm saying. You're wasting money. You're wasting money that's already very limited. And the fact that I already covered a story where Seattle was talking about their limited funding for their light rail projects and how they needed more funding for this and needed more funding for that, and then they're gonna essentially waste money on fare gates when their fare gates are easily able to get around them. It just doesn't make that much sense.
Without paying your fair share, most people say they support a barrier to board the light rail.
I wouldn't mind. I pay. I could see it being annoying if you had luggage for little kids.
Sound Transit is studying fare gates to improve compliance and safety. Sometimes it's a bumpy ride for Leandra Johnson.
It'd be cleaner. I think it's a good idea.
The agency is facing a $20 to $30 billion shortfall as it expands service across the region. Its CEO says the study is exploring options.
I've directed staff to research and be able to present to the board a proposal for launching a pilot to install fare gates at various key stations, as well as assessing the addition of fare gates as part of all of our future designs.
One man says it's unnecessary.
No, I don't think so. I mean, you got fare enforcement.
Fare ambassadors are the face of the current compliance system.
Wait, so you guys already have fare ambassadors? So you guys are already doing what I said. So you guys already have fare ambassadors on the trains. And then you're also going to do fare gates as well. It's like, so you're not only adding... Well, yes, yeah, exactly. Like fare gates on light rail. Yeah, yeah, but fare gates is a capital expense, and fare checking is operational. So now you're doing both. It's like, and I'm not saying that it's really a problem to do both, but you can't do both and then also complain about not having money. It's like, both of them are not. If you think that both of them aren't really gonna work, and it's like a performative. This is all performative measures to acting like you're trying to stop fare evasion, when in reality none of this is actually going to stop it.
Ensure passengers have proof of payment, and they're sometimes backed by security.
It's about time.
The agency is losing out on an estimated $1 million each year. Just as many fans are packing T-Mobile Park this season for the Mariners, and the Seahawks season is looking promising next door.
I don't know if they're making any money off of that.
Another hurdle
who said that? Why did I just hear a voice but I didn't see them? Anyways, but yeah, $1 million is $1 million really like? Is $1 million in fare evasion really worth doing all this? It's like, it's just, to me, it just doesn't seem worth it right now. You're already struggling. Like you already have the fare checkers, and then now you're doing fare gates on top of that. So now you're also adding like the capital expense of building or buying the fare gates, building them, installing them, and then maintaining them and doing all that type of stuff. And then you also have people actually going around checking the fare. It's like, it just doesn't seem like the battle that's worth fighting for right now. Especially seeing that if you're talking about losing $1 million a year when your entire system is seeing like $1 billion deficit when it comes to actually building the rest of the light rail extension. So it just seems like, yeah, to me it just seems like it seems like a weird way to pivot the blame for inefficiencies within the actual system itself when it comes to building new extensions, light rail extensions. So that's unfortunate.
Seahawks season is looking promising next door.
I don't know if they're making any money off of that.
Another hurdle are these ground level stations. Stations like this might require a whole redesign.
You can't get through.
And that's literally what I just said. Like, where are you going to put the fare gates? Like, buddy, where are you going to put the fare gates? And again, like I said, even if you do put the fare gates, what's stopping somebody from just walking on the tracks and just walking around it? Well, I don't know. I don't get it.
Level stations like this might require a whole redesign.
You can't get through those bars unless you pay, and it'll keep a lot of people off of the train that doesn't need to be on there, because a lot of people just hop on there and it's warm on there. They get on there, do their drugs, they get up there, go to sleep, throw trash everywhere.
And it goes what she's saying. If these people are already doing this stuff, look how low. This is not a barrier. You're telling me that this 1 foot off the floor type of platform is gonna stop them from just walking around the fare gate? It just doesn't make any sense. What is the purpose of having these fare gates when you literally can just walk around them on this system? Unlike any other system, like an actual metro system where you have high floor boarding, right? Where you would literally have to climb up to get around the fare gates. There's like actual effort being put in to get around the fare gates. This requires no effort. If you're already doing drugs and already, doing all this antisocial behavior, you can literally just walk around the fare gates. You can take the risk of walking on the train tracks or running on the train tracks to get around the fare gates for a second or 2 seconds. This 2 seconds is going to take you to go around it. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's warm on there. They get on there, do their drugs. They get up there, go to sleep, throw trash everywhere.
An announcement is around the corner and expected later this year. In Seattle, Alex McClune, King 5 News.
Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. I don't have much else for you guys to look at. Yeah, that's it. I guess W stream. I think that was a cool hour. We went through a bunch of different projects, and yeah. If any, hopefully, I don't know if there's gonna be any like other news that's gonna happen. Probably not much. People calling it a homeless shelter in the comments. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, W stream everybody. Guys, I'll see you guys next week when we talk about something different. I don't know. It's just been kind of random. All right, peace.